Hi guys, how you doing? I think your mics are off. I'm just gonna unmute you guys. I'll remute if anybody starts to have like some really weird noise going on. But for the most part, I just think it's better for you to be unmuted. Where if you want to like interject and ask some questions or anything along those lines, I'm more than happy for you to just butt in and interject. You don't. I always find using the chat is a bit awkward. So hi, I'm Taz. I'm a
Hi.
writer. I've written an array of things before, and I'm writing an array of things right now. Rather than going through them, I mean, if you want to see what I've written, you can just Google my name. But I just want to sort of get straight into the things that we were going to talk about. And like I said, feel free to stop me at any point if there's something that you want me to elaborate on, or something that something that I haven't mentioned that you want me to talk about. I've written mainly plays before, but I'm developing 3 feature films and a TV show right now with different production companies. So hopefully I can give you a view into what it's like to write for all these different mediums. Um, the main difference between the mediums, which is sort of the first thing that's on the agenda to talk about, um, is really just formatting. There's not this gets into sort of a larger conversation about writing scripts, but there's not as much of a difference between stage and screen as people may think. One of them's recorded and one of them isn't. In plays, you sort of tend to not describe as much in stage directions as you do in films. But really, the differences between stories come more within tone. Like when anybody says to you, like, writing for screen and writing for stage is very different. Not really. The structure sometimes can. Well, actually, no. The structure is very similar. The structure is very similar whether you're writing for stage, screen, whether that be big screen or small screen. It's just like the separation between all the structure points gets larger. Like if you're doing a 3 hour long play, then it's still going to follow the same sort of structure as most things do. The only difference is that like you have an hour to introduce everything instead of maybe half an hour that you would have in a feature film, or 5 pages that you would have in a short film or a pilot. That's the only real difference, is like how long you take to achieve every single story beat that most stories have. And then also people tend to have this idea that theater is like very grandiose and theater-esque, whereas actually it's not necessarily. Like there's plenty of straight Broadway plays that are not grandiose in any way, and same as some very like intimate pieces that you could easily just shoot and put on TV, or it could easily be a sitcom. Most sitcoms have a lot of similarities with plays in the sense of like how the dialogue is constructed and stuff like that. So the differences, like I said, they are in sort of the length and how long you take to establish every story beat. The formatting, stage, you don't really describe much. Film and TV, you do. But then, really, what makes things different is the tone that you're going for. I.e., it's very different to watch a sitcom TV show as it is to watch True Detective, or as it is to watch Scandal, or as it is to watch Sons of Anarchy. They're completely different tones, they're completely different worlds, even though they're all on screen. Same as with film, it's very different to watch a Woody Allen film than it is to watch a Barry Jenkins film or an Andrea Arnold film. One's socio-realistic and, at a certain pace, and the other one is, it's very pacey dialogue and it has like a heightenedness to it. Same with stage. So yes, that's the best way I describe differences between the mediums, more so than anything else. Anybody want to ask or comment anything on that? Feel free. There's no such thing as a stupid question, honestly. Even if your question's like really basic, like what program do I use? Which, by the way, is it's called for anything that's film or TV. It's called Final Draft. You really do want to submit it in Final Draft, just because it's the one that gives the format that everybody likes to read. I've had a couple of people ask me, like, can they use the free ones? I'm just writing it in here for everyone to have it. It's in the chat. There's some free ones, but they format it weird, man. Like if you're serious about it, just get final draft. It's $160. It sucks to have to pay that, but it just is what it is. If you submit something that's like weirdly formatted, you're at a disadvantage from the get-go, because as soon as somebody looks at it, they're going to go, this is going to be awkward to read. And for some reason it is. The free ones just awkwardly formatted so that you're like, it's not really, it doesn't flow for the eye. The next sort of that ties into formatting and stuff for plays. You can just write them on Word. Plays are a lot more liberal in the way that you can format them. Pick up a couple of plays, look at them, see which format works best for you and which one flows more for you. But TV and film are formatted in a very similar way. The differences, like I said, is how long you take to establish different story beats, and also I guess the one structural thing that would maybe differ from film to say TV is that it kind of depends on the channel that it's going to be on, right? Like if there's going to be a break after 15 minutes for a 30-minute show, then you're going to want to engineer a tiny bit of a cliffhanger or a question mark at that 15-minute mark before the break so that people will want to tune in afterwards. That tends to happen with ones that have like 4 breaks within an hour-long pilot. They'll have like 4 different cliffhangers. Like if you've ever noticed when you're rewatching old TV shows on some sort of streaming service, oftentimes they'll have like a weird fade to black that happens about 4 times during the episode. Like every 10 minutes or every 20 minutes, there'll be like a weird fade to black that just happens. And that's because that's where the commercial used to be. But now that it's on a streaming service, that commercial is no longer there. So they just have this little weird fade to black happening. And usually there's a little bit of a cliffhanger that happens just before then. Obviously structure is a lot more sort of complex than that. And we don't really have time to get into it on this call. That's much more of a like interactive sort of conversation that is best to be having like a workshop. But structure you don't sort of need like a whole book on structure. You just need like a very concise explanation to really understand it. There's nothing rocket sciencey about it. Once you sort of get it, it's very clear and you can move forward with it. I mean, I left school when I was 15, so if anyone's uneducated, if anyone is as uneducated as me can get it, anyone can fucking get it. Why some writers do best for all mediums. So this is something that this next thing is something that my mentors sort of taught me, and it's actually something that's very ingrained into British writing culture, and you might not have it as much in the US depending where you are. I know New York definitely has this sensibility because of Broadway, but I know LA and maybe other places don't as much, but I preach it nevertheless, is that I really advise anybody who's interested in writing to try their hand at different mediums. Try a play, try writing a play, even if you have no interest in theater or you think that you know what theater is, because that's another thing. A lot of people have this idea of what theater is because they saw a play once or 2 plays once. That's not really what the theater is. Vast and diverse, and there's a load of things. I don't like 75% of theater that's out there, but there's a 25% of it that I really like. And the upside to writing theater isn't just this sort of cultural thing that you feel like you should have to do. There's a real value to it, and that value is that when you write theater, you have nothing to trick the audience with other than your words. That's all you have. If you can write words that are interesting enough to keep people's attention for an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours, then when you go to write something for a screen medium like TV or for film, you're already gonna be so good at the most basic important bit that now you get given a bag of tricks when you get to do it on screen, that you're a super magician at this point. That's why a ton of the best sort of writers and directors worked in theater first. I mean, Shawn Mendes, who directs a load of the James Bond films, he spent years in the theater. The writer, I forget her name, but the writer who did Lady Bird also spent a long time in the theater. Barry Jenkins, a long time in the theater, the guy who wrote Moonlight, and directed Moonlight as well. Aaron Sorkin, who wrote Trial of the Chicago Seven, who wrote A Few Good Men, who wrote Molly's Game, David Mamet. There's tons of writers. Woody Allen is another example. There's tons of people that have sort of developed their craft in the theater before going to some sort of screen medium. And that doesn't mean that you have to do one before or one after. I'm just saying that I would really encourage you to experiment yourself in the most basic and pure form of storytelling, which is theater. I mean, when you think of theater, you maybe think Broadway, and Broadway isn't so pure, right? Because it's big and it's grandiose and it's a large stage and there's a big production value going on. But when you strip all the lights away and you strip the big expensive theater in the middle of New York, it essentially just is a bunch of people standing up saying words to each other. There's nothing really else happening. There's no big crew. Well, I mean, there is in a big theater, but you could essentially do any of the great plays around a campfire, and it would, with the same actors of the same level, would do equally as well. Yeah, anybody want to chime in or say anything or ask anything? Genuinely, no such thing as a stupid question. Feel free to, please. You guys are good? Okay. Then, right, so hopefully I've sort of conveyed that well enough at this point, about the mediums and why I recommend writing for everything. But once that's sort of hammered home, the next thing to talk about is what the most important things are to know, right, about writing. Because you can watch 1,000 interviews on YouTube and you can watch all the different master classes, and don't get me wrong, they all have like a value to them. They all have a very large value to them, but they can sometimes become confusing because everybody's saying something different, right? So what I want to tie this conversation back to is the most basic common things everybody needs to understand in order to write a good script, right? And what a good script is, because so let's use actors as like a metaphor. What makes a really good actor? Well, a really good actor is someone who combines, yes, a certain level of charisma, but charisma is a bit overrated because there's a ton of, actors that aren't necessarily that charismatic. What really makes a good actor is, A, do they know what they're saying? Like on the most basic level, is there sense to the words that they are saying? Do they understand what they are saying or why they are saying it? Cool. Are they grounded in themselves? Like, are they planting their feet on the ground and making informed movements? They're not just sort of like moving and shuffling and doing things that don't make sense. That's called grounding. 2, do they have emotional truth? Do you believe them in what they're saying, or are they faking it? 3, once you start sort of racking up all those things, and then yes, like, how interesting can you make a performance? In detail, are they using detail? Are they making it nuanced? But you can boil down what really great acting is to like a handful of things. If somebody hits all of those points, odds are they're going to be good. And it's the same kind of thing with scripts. You don't have to worry about making it super interesting, or you don't have to worry about, making it extravagant or making it shocking, or because those, as soon as you start to focus on those things, it can easily become like a gratuitous piece where you're just doing things for shock value or doing things to making interesting. When I always use the analogy that writing scripts are kind of like going on a date. If someone's reading a script of yours, it's kind of like they're going on a date with it. And if your script is on that table trying to seem interesting, same as on a date, if you go on a date and you're sat across the other person and you're just trying to be interesting, you're just going to be weird. The other person's just going to look at you and be like, you're just being weird. Why are you being weird? Whereas if you go on this date and you just be your fucking self, most of the time people are going to get along with you. And if they don't, then that's fine, because they were never going to get along with you anyway, especially not if you try to act interesting. It's the same with scripts. As soon as a script's trying to be interesting, you can tell that the writer tried to do that, rather than just trying to tell a story. And that, tying it back to the most important things that make a script good, is understanding, in my opinion, four things, 5 things really, is, is the story truthful? Is the story truthful? Is the story detailed? Is the story specific? If you can answer yes to all those questions, you're on a really good track, right? Has it got a decent structure? That's all it really needs, is a decent structure. It doesn't need to be structured to fuck. It doesn't need to follow the Disney, stereotypical arc of things, the hero's journey, or the 5-act structure, or the 7-act. It just really doesn't need to do that. It just has to have a semblance of like, all right, cool. You hit this beat, now we're here, now we're there, this happens, and then we're at the end. It needs to have that. If it's just a wash of words, then it's probably not a story. It's a TED talk, or it's a poem, or it's a load of things, but it's not a play, a TV show, or a film. Does it have a decent structure? Then is like, are the characters interesting? And by interesting is, are the characters specific? Are the characters truthful? Are the characters honest? Not honest as in like they are honest as characters, but honest as in that they are real characters. So an example of this is like, if somebody wants to write a character who's an athlete, they'll very easily go down the athlete path and stop thinking about the real world for some reason. They'll go, okay, the person's an athlete, so then, I don't know, they must eat chicken and broccoli. And then since they eat chicken and broccoli and they're an athlete, then, they must go to bed every day at 10. And then because they do that, then they must be really structured people, and they don't do drugs. Whereas actually, that's not the real world, isn't it? Most of us can identify with some sort of person who is an athlete and is like in really good shape, but also does cocaine on the weekends, runs a marathon, but then smokes a cigarette afterwards. Like people who are just contradicted like that. And that's what most of us are. Most of us are that. Most of us are earnest, but then cowardly at the same time. Or we're cowardly for some things and really brave for others. We're super intelligent with our hands, but then we can't do maths. There's a ton of think 3-dimensionally about those characters and make them real. And it's really not that difficult. Just look at people around you, base them on someone you know. That's the easiest way to do it. And tone. Again, all of these things, I'm just giving you a really broad wash over them. It's hard to get into them in a sort of reduced amount of time, but tone is a really important thing for your script, because tone basically defines what you're going to get away with, what your world is, what the setting is for the characters to be in. Dialogue, does it have dialogue that flows? And there's a load of tricks that you can use to make good dialogue. It's really a lot easier than it looks, and it's something that with a little bit of practice and a little bit of guidance, you can get really good at dialogue and choosing the right medium for it. If you do all of those things, which I know now in retrospect sounds like fairly a lot, but it's not when you have enough practice. When you sort of do it enough, I don't want to say it becomes simple, but it can become a lot more intuitive to sort of hit all of these points. And if your answer to all of those things that I just mentioned is, yep, got that, yep, I hit that, yeah, I did that, that's in the right place, this is good. That's what a good script is. That's really all it is. Anybody have questions? No, you guys are good.
Do you think you could talk more just about the dialogue flow? I mean, kind of expand on that just a little bit, I guess.
Dialogue. What do you mean by expand on dialogue flow? As in, like, what makes good dialogue?
Right. Like, what makes good dialogue, and how we can actually, what techniques we can actually use to make it better, I guess.
So, what makes good dialogue? Good dialogue is formed by a lot of things. One of them is voices. So having real voices, and voices are composed of a lot of things. It's composed of fail-safe words. So I say a lot. I say I also have a lexicon that I use that is very different from the lexicon you use. You would probably, as an American, you will use words that are very different from me as a Brit. And when people are writing, they often forget those things. Like we, as Brits over here, for example, we get a lot of scripts that are characters that they want to be British, but you can tell it's been written by an American, and vice versa. I'm sure there's a lot of Brits that write American scripts that an American would read and be like, a British person wrote this. It's very easily forgotten, but that is, you can tell, it's palpable when a British person is saying American words, or American speech patterns. But then even within that, you can become more specific. You know, what are the fail-safe words that people use? What's the punctuation look like? Do they speak in long sentences or short sentences? Do they give you one-worded answers, or do they really go off and elaborate? That is an element that makes really good dialogue. The other one is rhythm. What's the rhythm of your writing? And there's various different examples of this, but there is no one set rhythm. Again, just because I'm pressed for time, there's only so much I can kind of go into that. But you get what I'm saying. Essentially, what makes really good dialogue is specificity. That's like the most concise way, is that every single word you write, every single punctuation dot you put on the page should be for a reason. And that doesn't mean that you have to like measure it. Doesn't mean you have to be like, oh, should I put one more punctuation or not? But it's almost like setting it in your brain. So you're like, okay, now I'm writing Dan. And you know what Dan sounds like, but you really know what Dan sounds like. So when you're writing Dan, boom, it comes out. Another really good, just quickly, a good trick is repetition. A ton of really good writers do this. Pick a word, revolve around it. Just literally pick a word and revolve around that fucker for a whole page. And you'd be surprised how much you can milk from that. Like, did you steal my water? What water? That water. Which water? I don't see any water. The water that's on the table. What water is on the table? Are you fucking kidding? There's water on the, like, you can just riff on that for a whole, and before you know it, you got a scene. That's a really good one to get you out of writer's block. The word playwright. Does anybody know what the word playwright? Well, actually, everybody knows what playwright means. But has anybody ever noticed and thought about why playwright is written WRIGHT instead of the way that writer is written?
No.
So write, as in like the WRIGHT version, to write something means to shape something. And obviously the playwrights existed before screenwriters did. And I just thought that was it's a beautiful thing that a mentor told me about once. And I always sort of repeat, because I think it's important to recognize that writing is less so about writing, as in like pushing buttons on a keyboard and making letters come out. And it's much more about shaping, about writing in the GHT version of it. Because you can write all these words on a page, but then the writing of the script really comes to life in the drafting process. Once you've had that first draft, what you do with it from there onwards is really what the writing process is all about. The getting it on the page, that's all it is. That's just getting it on the page. That's the writing bit in the TER, like sort of sense of it. But the GHT version of it is what writing is. That's where scripts are born. And even the ones that everybody knows as like one-shot wonders, like, I don't know, Rocky, for example. Like, some of you will know, some of you won't. Like, Rocky went through a very large drafting process where it wasn't the script that you saw on screen the first time it fell into Erwin Winkler's hands. Good Will Hunting went through a very large drafting process. Most films and plays and TV shows went through a really long, laborious drafting process before they made it to what they sort of ultimately became. And that's in terms of character development, that's in terms of structure, that's in terms of tone. Everything gets sort of reworked. And it's really important to have that team around you to do that. And whether that be, you know, mentors, whether that be workshops, whether that be people that you meet through workshops, being around other writers and being around other people who have experience doing that, the osmosis of it is the best way to sort of put yourself in the position to then shape your work in the right way. Reading more things, watching more things, actively watching. I really encourage actively watching, as in sitting there with a notepad and a pen and going through and sort of taking note of every single thing that happens on screen. I do this exercise with people that I do workshops with sometimes, and it's basically I go through all of the different structure points that or plot points that films and plays and TV shows are usually structured around, and then I ask them to go away and watch some of their favorite pieces and basically answer the questions for each one of those structure points, like where's this in that film, where's that in that film, where's that in that film. And more often than not, they'll all come back and be like, I never realized how obvious it is. Because it's the thing, it's like the beauty of it is that it's so obvious, but great writers do it in a way where they just get it past you. And you, unless you're looking for it, you never spot it. But as soon as you're looking for it, you're like, oh, that's where that is. Oh, and that's where, okay, that's where this bit happens. And then this bit, which always comes. And it's blatantly obvious to the point where it almost ruins work for you a little bit, because you already know to a degree what's coming. You might not know what it is that is coming. So like, when a twist happens, like you won't know what that twist is, of course, because then that's part of the coloring. But the fact that a twist is coming, or given certain genres, you can kind of always expect it around the same page mark once you learn certain aspects of structure. I think I've spoken a little bit about what makes things interesting already, but just to reiterate, like interesting is truthful. And that I don't mean to be sort of like a purist with that. But especially with the first few things that you're writing, I really advise to make them just about something small that you may think is really uninteresting, but I guarantee you is interesting to someone. All of you guys come from a world that is very alien to mine. You come from a completely different continent. I'm fascinated with America, for example. I think it's an amazing country. I would happily read and watch anything from any of you guys' small town or specific thing of life that you've gone through, because you're completely alien to me. And you may seem uninteresting to yourselves because you live with you. But I don't live with you, and neither do the other billions of people that live in the world. They don't live with you. You're very interesting to them. And I genuinely mean that. Same as the way I speak is probably interesting to you in some way, because you don't hear it all the time. Whereas the way I speak is very uninteresting to me. I get sick of fucking hearing myself. But it's important to consider that. And that's something that is, I do these calls sometimes with like production companies and like Audible. I've got a call with Audible tomorrow, and I usually ask them the same sort of questions about like what makes things interesting, and I record them and I send them out to people that I work with, and they invariably, most of them say the same thing. They're almost getting a little bit repetitive, because like when I ask them what they think interesting stories are, and they're just like specificity. One of the people I spoke to recently said that she's always looking for that one line in a script that is not generic, that just tells her this writer knows that world. So rather than like, I'm going to write this thing about, I don't know, gangsters. I mean, you can write something about gangsters, but I would much rather you write something about gangsters if you have some sort of connection to that world and you can be very specific about it. You know, what kind of gangsters are they? Do you know them? You know, don't make them generic gangsters. And is there a line in there that is going to make someone go, this is original? this is something that the writer really knows about, or the writer's heard, or the writer had a family member who heard that, that specificity, that honesty is really what makes things interesting and what people are looking for, not grandioseness. And then again, all the other things that I've mentioned. The best ways to develop your work and your craft as a writer from the ground up. Again, I'm going to sound a little bit like a fucking foghorn repeating itself, but one of them is just write genuinely, even if you have no fucking idea what you're doing, because as I think writing or learning your craft as a writer is a combination of learn a bit, do a bit, learn a bit more, do a bit more, learn a bit more, do a bit more. That's the best way. If you just learn shitloads, that's not valuable to you, because by the time you go to then implement that knowledge that you've learned, there's sort of too much happening that it can almost cause like a block for you, because you're like, I've got to think about all these things. Whereas if you just learn a little bit, like hopefully you might have learned a little bit on this call. Well, it might not be much, but you might have learned a little bit in this half an hour, 40 minutes that we're going to end up speaking. Go write something. Just go write something and try to implement the one thing that you might have taken away from this. Even if you don't really know how to implement that yet, but just try it. Because then by trying it, you're going to come up with questions, specific questions, not general questions, specific questions. And then when you do another workshop or you do another class or you do something else along these lines, you're going to be able to ask those questions and you're going to be able to receive specific answers. When somebody teaches, I don't consider myself to be a teacher at all. I'm just a writer, and I enjoy doing this, and I enjoy sort of giving the information that I never had access to. But when I share information, I'm doing broad strokes. And I'm just trying to cover as much as I can, as concisely as I can. And I'm going to miss some stuff. But if you have specific questions that you come up with because you've actually tried to do something and then you come up against a block and you want to ask questions, I will be able to cover that. Somebody who's a writer will be able to cover that. But you have to come with those questions. The only way to get those questions is by writing. So the way to develop your craft is write, and expose yourself to other people who are further along at writing than you. And be careful with who that is, right? Because you don't want to, it's not further along at writing than you is not your friend who's written a couple more things than you, or your friend who says they know about writing, or it's like, are they making money doing this? That's, I mean, not that money is the gauge of everything, but it should be some sort of gauge when you're taking advice. Like, a really great friend of mine has a really cool quote. He goes, never get a bad haircut from someone who has bad hair. It's kind of the same thing. Don't take script advice or don't take writing advice from people who don't write great scripts. Are they making money? Do they have an agent who represents them? Have they had a piece published? Whatever that is, they need to sort of prove that they are worth, because if not, it can actually be more detrimental than it can helpful to receive bad advice from people, because they'll come from their biases like, well, stories need to be like this. Well, actually, do they? That's another really good gauge, is whenever somebody says something needs to be like this or you need to do this, they're probably wrong. Nothing needs to be like anything. It just needs to be, it needs to be whatever you want it to be, but you need to learn what the rules are. This is what you need to do. I think that you need to learn what the rules are, or maybe not even learn what the rules are. You need to, I'd advise having a knowledge of what the rules are, i.e. like what proper structure is, what proper tone is, what, the proper way of writing dialogue is, all those things. Learn them to a degree, and then break those rules. Break all the things you've learned. Fuck them all off. Forget about them. But know them so that at least when somebody quotes it to you, you can go, yeah, I chose not to honor that. I chose not to do it like that. Why? Because of this, this, and this. Okay, that person can't argue with you anymore. And I'm the first one to say that, is that nothing needs to be like anything. Anybody who says something unequivocal to you is by omission unequivocally wrong, because there is no right or wrong answer. All there is with this kind of stuff is perspectives, opinions. It's the same thing with paintings. there's a way of critiquing paintings, there's a way of critiquing art, but you can also miscritique art. You can also miscritique paintings. The same thing with scripts. Judging them is very difficult to do. How to go about getting your projects made and the importance of structure and time self. So I mean, structure and time and self setting deadlines, and that's a simple one, man. Be consistent. Like do a class every now and then, and make sure you do it. Like set yourself a goal to do a certain amount a year, or do a certain amount of workshops per year. It really will benefit you. Or spend a certain amount of time with your mentor, or whatever that is. Spend a certain amount of time writing, so even if it's 5 minutes a day. Let's be honest, it's difficult to do it every single day. Anybody who says otherwise is, chatting shit. Everybody misses a few days here and there, but definitely sort of set yourself the goal to do it every day. If you miss 3 days, then you miss 3 days. If you set yourself a goal to do it 3 times a week, then you're probably going to end up doing it 1 or none. But if you say, look, I'm going to write every day, you're probably going to miss some days. But if you write 4 times in a week, that's not bad. 4 times a week for an hour, half an hour, 10 minutes, it's better than nothing. And you'd be surprised how much that will do for you in the long run, that consistency. And then how to go about getting projects made. Well, fuck me. It's a long process, that's how. But this is the path, right? And you can stray from the path and you might find a better path. But this was my path, is have a bunch of different tiers of projects that you can work on. So you have your thing that's like super cheap that you can make for nothing. You can film on your phone. You can put on a pub theater. You can put on in a back room, a fucking community center, whatever that is. The thing you can make for nothing with no help, with your own money, if any money. And then you have your thing that you need producers for. The thing that you need a channel for, the thing that you need help with. And the way it works for most people, actually, is just you never really hear about this one. You only ever hear about this one. But this one is the most important one, the cheap one. Because the cheap one is the one that you're going to do, and it's going to be impressive because you did it for nothing, and the story was really good, and the characters were really good, and the tone was really clear, the dialogue was great. And because you did that, people are going to come see it. And sometimes that is, if it's on at a festival, then if it goes to a film festival, then you can send an email to an agent and go, hey, Mr. Agent, my film got on at a film festival. Would you like to watch it? And they'll go, yeah, because it has a little stamp of approval on it. And then once that agent goes, yeah, now I'd like to watch it, then they watch it and they go, cool, what else have you got? What do you want to do next? And then you go, here's my second one. And that's the one that you need help with. But you can only sort of most of the time get access to doing this second one once you've proven yourself with this first one. And this first one can look like shit. It can look like a piece of shit. It can sound, well, I mean, you want it to sound good, but it can look like a piece of shit. It could get put on at a really small venue somewhere that nobody cares about, but you did something. You put effort into something, you did something, and hopefully you've proven yourself by making it good. There's a ton of really good pieces out there that look like utter shit. There's a film called The Magician it's on Amazon Prime. It's an Australian guy that made it. Looks like a piece of shit. It was done on a mini DV camera. Excuse me. It was done on a mini DV camera, and it's grainy and shit. But now that guy has a series on FX based on that feature film that he made for like no money, for like $300, and it's funny. It's a really good little film. And the what's the series called on FX? It's called Mr. In Between. The Duplass brothers, who have had a lot of series on HBO. They've had Togetherness on HBO. They do Room, I think it's called Room 104. I'm not sure what channel that's on. They've done a bunch of films for Warner Brothers. One of the Duplass brothers is in The Morning Show for Apple TV. And they made like a $5 short, $3 short. I can't remember now, but it's like another like piece of shit looking short that they filmed in like a little home video camera, and it got into Sundance, and that instigated their career. There's a ton of people that have done that. Even like to a degree, myself, I put on a play that a really small venue about a topic that I cared about. It got turned down by every single venue in London, theatre venue in London. And then it got transferred to a slightly bigger venue in London. And then it got nominated for an Olivier, which is like a British Tony award. And now I get to meet everybody now. Just off of that one little thing that I did for no money. I get to go on meetings 3, sometimes 4 times a day with production companies who are interested in reading my next thing that I want to do, that I'm interested in writing. But that, again, comes off of you doing that thing for nothing first, proving that you really want to do this and you're willing to put yourself through the hardship of fucking doing that. Because it's not that fun a lot of the time when you're forcing your way through some of that work. But it's very rewarding at the end. That's pretty much it, dudes. that's how to get started. That's the best advice I have to sort of how to get started. If you want to ask any questions, you're more than welcome to. If not, feel free to shoot off as well. I'm going to stick around.
Thank you.
Thanks, my lovely. Anyway, so you guys are good? Okay. Kyle, are you?
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's anything.
If anything comes up, feel free to email Blake and ask him to forward it on to me. I'm fine to answer any little thing that you have. But good luck with everything, guys. I really genuinely, again, I hope that you guys write your things, and I really want to see more people writing and doing what they want to do. So best of luck with it. I hope this was in some way helpful, and you guys have a good day. Okay.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye, guys.